Hello, greetings, welcome to the Dividing Line. It is, I think it's Tuesday. Hard to say anymore, but it's all meld together after you're in your seventh decade somewhere. Anyway, good news today. I can't, since we haven't signed anything or anything like that yet, but looks like there will be a debate in Tullahoma in about 5 weeks from now. Which means that my my time home just became very, very busy, much busier than I expected it to be, but that's good. And I'm going to tell you what, I think what I'm going to do, now look, I don't know how many years ago it was. I sat down and I put a lot of effort into listing out and counting everything that I would honestly include as a formal debate that I've done since August of 1990. And since then, I've just added to that. And I don't know where that list is. I probably couldn't reproduce it. But I just keep adding to it. And that's how, right now, the number that I have is I'm at 198. But I think I've been inconsistent. And what I mean by that is I purposefully decided not to include one particular debate because my opponent wasn't, well, let's just say my opponent will always be in the stuff that we use for the Radio Free Geneva stuff. Okay, then don't force me to make you defend. I stop and drop my head every single time I listen to that. So I have not, yes, there's a picture of me doing this number in 2016. So I have not included the Steve Tassi debate in my running total. But look, Steve Tassi was not the worst guy I debated. Nader Ahmed, I think, is probably the worst guy I've ever debated. And I included him. And I think I debated him twice, when I think of it. There have been some others. And so I've just gone, there were, a couple of hundred people there that night. We had to turn people away. A lot of people watched it. I'm being inconsistent not to include that in the debate list. So I've decided I'm going to go back and we'll pop that into the, I don't know, it may be the list on the website isn't the one that I've used. And there's stuff on that list that I don't include in mine. There's some radio programs and stuff that weren't necessarily moderated public debates. So we'll probably go back. If it's not listed there, it might be. But if it's not, we'll throw it on there. But if that puts me at 199, then the next formal moderated public debate would be the big 200. Not that anybody's going to care about that. Within the next 2 months, month and a half, I will pass 175,000 miles ridden on bike. And I have one friend, just one friend, who does not even live in Arizona, that cares at all. Rich doesn't care. Rich could care less. My family could care less. They stopped caring at 20,000 miles, okay? That was 155,000 miles ago. When I tell people, I just passed 120,000 miles. Oh, that's great, Dad. So my kids don't care. My wife doesn't care. My grandkids don't care. My son-in-law doesn't care. Nobody at church cares. Did I say Rich didn't care? Yeah, Rich doesn't care. Nobody cares, except this one friend in St. Charles. He's the only person that is actually keeping track of how close I'm getting. I'm 300 and 80 some odd miles or something like that away from 175,000 miles. So no one's really going to care when I hit 200 debates either. It's just a number. And if I'm riding along that day and I see the number go by, I'll just keep pedaling. It's just how it works. And if another debate comes up, then you do your 201st. That's just the way it is. So we have a dialogue. I hate that term. We have a dialogue in Nashville. This trip coming up. So it's all of September. I'm going to be gone all of September on the road. And, but the fellow that I'm going to be dialoguing with didn't want to call it a debate. So since there's there will be a moderator. Anyway, it won't count because it doesn't have cross-examination and stuff like that. Which, as I recall, the Tassie debate did, sort of. Anyway, so the dialogue, that will require me to be reading an entire book between now and then and preparing for that. And then it looks like we're going to have I would call it a big debate, not just because it's number 200, but when I look at debates, I'm not concerned about how big the audience is. I'm concerned how valuable, once I'm in a pine box, stuck in the ground someplace, how valuable will this particular debate be to the next generation of people who might be watching these things and utilizing them for assistance and help? This one will be important. This one will definitely be, it's very, very important. Thankfully, a biblical, exegetical topic related to the deity of Christ. So got word that that's going to go ahead and happen, and I'm excited about that. That's going to be a huge trip. Huge trip. I mean, the number of times I'm going to be speaking, the range of topics I'm going to be addressing, number of different states, churches. We're catching for a long trip like this, we're catching a number of the road trip at aomin.org churches. If you're not familiar with that, we have an email address, roadtrip@aomin.org. And if you send in your church contact information and stuff like that, you get put on a map. And sometimes I can pop over to a church. It's nearby where I'm going to be traveling. And it's informal in the sense that I'll probably be exhausted having been driving all day. And it probably on a Tuesday night or something like that. Both of these are on Monday nights, actually. But that's how we get to visit with folks and see folks and get into churches that we otherwise wouldn't have the opportunity of doing. So I'm doing a couple of those on this trip. It's harder to do those when you're doing a long trip because your days tend to be longer and you have less time. You still want to commit to something if you've got a 50% chance you're not even going to make it, type of situation. So it's going to be a big trip. We need your help to make it happen. The cost of oil is staying up there. There really hasn't been a crash in global oil markets or anything like that. And so help us to get all the way back to Pennsylvania. My far point will be in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, with Chris Arnzen, and then heading back from there. And that, as far as I know, the only other trip I have. The rest of the year is our annual trek to St. Charles, Covenant of Grace Church, Van Lee and family. Well, sort of the family. All the folks there at the church. 25 solid years. And this will probably be the last 1st of December trip. I mean, 25 years is long enough. They need to find someone younger. Need to find a different time to have their... I'd like to be home between Thanksgiving and Christmas for once. Haven't for a quarter of a century. And well, there was one exception there when I was, but that was for health reasons. But this will be our big last hurrah. Doesn't mean I won't be going by the church in the future, but it'll probably be part of, planning that along with the rest of a trip or something like that, a couple years down the road. But that'll be it for the year, but we're already planning. We've got some real interesting possibilities in February. Man, I hope it's not as cold as it was last February. We'd have to drive through it anyways this time. But looking at some cool stuff in February, maybe into the early part of March, with possibility of some dialogues and trying to find the proper person to have a meaningful, fully recorded debate on the perpetual virginity of Mary. Most of the people have debated on that either haven't been very well known or are considered apostates or heretics today. It happens. Boy, there's a lot of stuff about that on the web right now. And I've said for years, the more we're pushed into the same cultural space, the more of these conversations will take place. And you're not going to get, like I said, only Bob Sungenis has ever been willing to debate the bodily assumption. And even then, they don't really debate the bodily assumption. They debate. It's sort of like when I debated Bassam Zawadi in London on whether no. It was Zatari. It was Sami Zatari. Well, it's the same church, is why I confused them. And I think they were 1 year apart. There in Wandsworth. Anyway, we debated. We were going to debate the crucifixion, and it ended up being a debate on the resurrection rather than the crucifixion. So they attacked the resurrection rather than defending the historicity of the crucifixion, because as you know, in Islam, they deny that Jesus Christ was crucified, according to Surah 4:157 in the Quran. So it's very much along the same lines, type of a sort of shift the burden of proof type thing. And so that's what they do. That's what Roman Catholics do with bodily assumption. Is, well, we just have the authority to define it. We're not going to try to actually defend it as historical belief because the church says that it is, therefore it is. But we won't defend it historically. And same. I'm sitting here thinking, have we done a debate on the Immaculate Conception? Well, yeah, it's true. We did all 4 topics with Jerry, but that was, man, in one night. What were we thinking? Jerry and I must have been pretty young. We did that. That was a long night. But the one with Christopher Ferrara, was that on the Immaculate Conception or the Perpetual Virginity? You might want to look that up. That'd be interesting to know. Yeah, it's hard to find, and that's why as often as Bob has, I thought, misbehaved in a debate, he's at other times been just great. There was that one debate we did where we had to self-moderate. He worked with me on that, and I appreciated that. I like Bob Sungenis personally. He's a nice guy, and he's been willing to take the lumps for taking the views that he has. So you got to give him credit on that. Yeah, I'm not sure if we've done the Immaculate Conception. That would be something that would be worthwhile. But again, it always comes down to, well, we have the authority to tell you these things, and that's how that is. Before I jump into the main topic, but anyway, so by the way, both of those conferences, the one in Nashville, Franklin, we have a link at aomin.org. There is a thing to sign up at, and they need you to sign up for that so they know who's coming and stuff like that, make proper arrangements. We do have, I think, 4 speakers coming in and things like that. It should be if Jason Lyle's there, Eli Ayala, I mean, come on, I'd come to that. Just, I learn a lot from Jason and Eli. And Jason tells me that the fourth speaker, whose name I don't have this in front of me, is a friend of his. And so if he's a friend of Jason Lyle's, then that means great. That he's very, very intelligent. It was the Immaculate Conception? Okay, so we did do one on the Immaculate Conception, and unfortunately my opponent, a Roman Catholic attorney, decided to use fake forged citations from Augustine and stuff. So, and if I recall correctly, I don't think that was videoed. Yeah, there was something wrong with it. Yeah. I remember there was some issue, and well, that first debate with Jerry was recorded off house sound too. It's terrible. Yeah, well, it was a long time ago. We've learned since then how to make sure you've got something you can actually listen to. So yeah, lots of cool stuff coming up, and then like I said, in February, Dallas. And then right now the plan is to go from Dallas to Jacksonville, Florida, to the Your Calvinists Church. we're gonna have have something to do with denominations. I'm sure will be involved when that guy's involved. The king of the amillennialists, which I have to wonder. Is that sort of like a Monty Python thing? Did some hand come up from the water and throw him? I don't know. Anyway, it should be a lot of fun to do all that kind of fun stuff. What? A harbor? Yeah, it will be a Harbor Freight debate with Keith Foskey on something. Probably something about bow ties or anything like that. I'm not sure, but. Anyway, before we get to the main topic of some very, people have been saying, well, is this all you're going to say about David Allen's new book and stuff like that? And it's like, no. As I said when I first saw it while traveling, I'm not even sure that I want to invest time in this self-published book that is just all over the map. But we will be spending some time on it. Before we get to that, though, between 2006 and 2010, so about 4 years, if you go back and look at the dividing line, you will see program after program after program on the subject of Islam. And it is not that I have lost interest in Islam or something like that. But through 2019, I was traveling regularly to London, to Australia, and especially to South Africa. And South Africa is the home of Ahmed Deedat, the most listened to this day. He died 20 years ago. In fact, I should look up the date of his death. That would be something Algo would not have memorized, but could probably track it down real fast. He died in 2005, and I started studying Islam and really doing work in that area in 2006. But South Africa has been deeply impacted by the teachings and honestly the showmanship. Yeah, I said 2005. So August 8th. Okay. All right. So yeah, just about there. I thought it was sometime during the summer that he had died. I knew it was 2005. And so the South African Muslim experience, shall we say, has been deeply marked by Ahmed Deedat. And many of the Muslims with whom you will dialogue, if they come from a majority Muslim country, will use the arguments of Ahmed Deedat. That doesn't mean they're scholarly, because they're not. Deedat assiduously avoided debating people that could take him out. He only made that mistake one time. It was more toward the end of his career too. But he took on Josh McDowell, and Josh McDowell took him out. Really did. He defeated him. You just listen to it. It's very clear. His arguments are not scholarly, but as I said, he was a showman, but just a tremendous speaker. And so you go to South Africa and you do debates, and man, I think there were times we did 2, sometimes 3 debates in a single trip. So we were dealing with Islam a lot during that time frame. And so it's not that I've lost interest in all of that, but with COVID and the rise of techno-tyranny and the fact that, honestly, with what I'm seeing coming out of the UK, I know some of my friends went over there. Tony Costa was over there. The Gripper was over there. And I'm sure they were saying strong things, about Islam. But there is no free speech in the United Kingdom any longer. There really isn't. And there would be for Muslims. That's the weird part of it. Is you could, if you, as a Muslim, you can say whatever you want in the United Kingdom. If you're a Christian, respond in an allegedly Christian nation, you could end up in the hoosegow. Anyway, so back then, I certainly was aware of certain trends. And again, I almost hesitate to mention this in passing because it would take so much time to even cover all the foundational issues. But if you go to a mosque today, so for example, if you go online and you watch the 2013 debate that I did with Shabir Ali at the Abu Bakr Siddiq Mosque in Erasmus, South Africa, you will see that I am standing at a certain point in the mosque itself. The imam had led the prayers there before we set up the tables and things like that. And so I'm standing in front of what's called the Qibla. And a Qibla in a mosque points only one direction. The Qibla points to the Grand Mosque, really, literally, to the Black Stone in the Grand Mosque in Mecca. And that's how you know. Now, obviously, today, with smartphones and stuff like that, there are all sorts of apps that you can buy. Well, you don't have to buy them. Islamic apps that will tell you exactly which direction Mecca is from where you are and that kind of thing. But that's fairly new technology, relatively speaking. But I was aware of the fact that there have been studies that have demonstrated that some of the oldest found mosques, the Qiblas are not pointing at Mecca, they're pointing at Jerusalem. And there is no Qibla in the Dome of the Rock. Well, what does that tell you? Well, it tells you that there was development taking place in Islamic belief and things like that, which is not shocking or surprising, though it may be shocking and surprising to Muslims. Just as when I talk about the fact that the deity of Christ is plainly taught in Scripture, but the terminology we use to express it developed over time because the gospel goes out in the world, it encounters different philosophies and languages and things like that. And so you have to answer those questions, and so you develop language to answer those types of things. And there is doctrinal development in that sense. Not in the sense you're coming up with something new, not like saying, well, monotheism is doctrinal development. No, it's not. That's plainly taught in Scripture. But what that means and how you apply it in answer to other religions and things like that, that could be an example of doctrinal development over time. So same thing happens within Islam, and certainly there are Muslims in the Western world that go, yeah, that happened, but the vast majority of Muslims are like, nah, I don't think so. And there are a lot of Christians that likewise, when you talk about that, oh no, we've always believed exactly the way I've understood it and the way I would say it and stuff like that. And it's, well, no, not really. Um, so I was aware of the fact that there were Mohammedan mythicists, people who were literally saying that Muhammad did not exist, that there was no historical person named Muhammad. Now, of course, there are Jesus mythicists. They're a rather small group. Even Bart Ehrman has written a book against the Jesus mythicists. He believed Jesus existed. And you can demonstrate that from historical sources. But there were some Muhammad mythicists. And remember, if you're not familiar with all this stuff, Muhammad dies by tradition, Islamic tradition, in 632. And so you're talking over half a millennium after Jesus. So Islam, historically, now not from their perspective, they would dispute this, but historically is a much younger faith. So its historical pedigree should be easier to establish because, hey, 600 years is 600 years. The farther you go back, the less you have of records. Written documents can't survive as long. Things like the ravages of war and time and flood and pestilence and earthquake. Seriously, earthquakes wiped out all sorts of important archaeological sites and things like that. Anyway, so Islam is much younger by 600 years. And so that is one of the differences that a lot of people don't think about when we talk about this kind of stuff. Anyway, so I knew that there were those who were literally making the argument there never was a Muhammad, that what we have today evolved over time. It's the result of a lot of redaction. Ibn Malik, stuff that happening around the beginning of the 8th century. You have redaction of the Quran. And you don't have a whole lot of early Islamic manuscripts and things like that. The Sa'ana manuscripts have all sorts of variants and differences in them, and they're not complete. And so there's a lot of that kind of. That was very, very interesting to me. One of the main areas of my study, and initially I really was thinking about pursuing graduate study in the textual history of the Quran. I still have right down there 2 museum quality reproductions of some of the earliest Quranic manuscripts that we possess. One in the British Museum, the other one in Paris. And yes, they're right down there under D, right there. There you go. Got to do it all backwards. Yeah, like right there and there. They're sitting on top of Codex Sinaiticus, not the original, but those 2 right there. And that's the 1550 Stephanus right there, in case you're wondering. So anyway, I was aware of all that kind of stuff. And over the past number of years, I've seen some stuff coming out from Fander Films. And a good man, a very dedicated man, Jay Smith, Dr. Jay Smith, whom I have fellowshipped with and met with. There was a group of us back in the day called Scholars with a Dream. And that's where I got funding to do my initial Arabic studies and things like that. Met a lot of these guys that have published since then. Some aren't even with us anymore, actually. But I had seen videos coming out from Jay and Fander Films. And I found them fascinating. I found them very interesting. And what's really interesting is I just found out, so I'm a little bit behind the 8 ball on this. I don't really have contact with these guys anymore. If I wanted to, I'm sure that they would speak with me, but I think they figure I've just gone my own way. And Though I was one of the only solidly reformed people in the group, so that may have something to do with it. Anyway, I was watching a presentation that Jay made recently in Albuquerque, and I do not know what the relationship between Veritas Theological Seminary in Albuquerque is and the one founded by Norman Geisler. Did it move to Albuquerque? I don't know. He described it as Calvary Chapel's theological seminary. And that he, Jay Smith, is now working with it and offering a degree in Islamic apologetics and polemics, which he, interestingly enough, he made a distinction between apologetics and polemics that I wouldn't necessarily make myself, but he did. And in essence, what he is presenting now is a full-on attack on the historical existence of Muhammad as an individual. And it's based on differentiating between Muhammad and Muhammad and the development of vowel pointing in Arabic. And I have to admit, I lost a little bit of this. This wasn't meant to be a super scholarly presentation, so there were a couple times when Jay said things like he was displaying like what I would have in these manuscripts here that don't have the vowel pointing or before it developed. And he was saying to an Arabic reader in the audience, you can't read that, can you? Nobody can because there aren't any vowels. And I'm like, but Hebrew was written and read and used for centuries and centuries and centuries. You know, the Dead Sea Scrolls don't have vowel pointing either. All that means is that it was much more contextually interpreted. But that doesn't mean you couldn't read it, and that didn't mean it didn't continue to convey a objective message, in essence. So I didn't really didn't understand that, and I'd have to ask. So what's fascinating is pretty much saying there was no historical man named Muhammad. There were people named Muhammad, which simply means highly praised one, and his theory is initially that was just simply a title of a highly praised person. It wasn't a specific historical individual. And then he started getting into, for example, the hadith, and I've spent time on this program narrating hadith to you. Sometimes reading it, sometimes just memory. I told you that years and years ago, I listened to all of Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim while riding my bike. And the reason much of that sticks is the same story would be told over and over and over again. So it's repetition. And what was fascinating was part of his presentation, it seemed to me, was saying that what's in the hadith actually doesn't go back any earlier. And we knew there's a 200 to 300 year gap between Muhammad's life and the initial gathering of these things. But he's arguing that in some instances it's a 700, 800, 900 year gap. And that what we've been told about Bukhari and things like that just simply aren't true. Not that they didn't exist, but we don't have any manuscripts that go back to them. Well, again, I'm going to have to ask some questions, because just because we don't have a manuscript from the 9th century, let's say you're saying, yes, Bukhari, 9th, 10th century, somewhere around there, but we don't have any manuscripts to go back there. The earliest manuscript we have are 1400. That doesn't mean that Bukhari didn't compile that material earlier. It just means we don't have manuscripts to go back that far. Now, again, Islam's younger. You know, you're talking within the past 1,000 years, at least with the New Testament. We have lots of New Testament manuscripts from 1000 AD onward. So it is a little bit strange that we wouldn't have that kind of stuff, but it certainly would not be a solid argument to say that this stuff was made up at that point in time. Just simply that we don't have manuscripts that go through that period. We don't have manuscripts that go through what's called the dark period in the first, 150 years in the New Testament either, but we don't have that for any work of antiquity at all. You don't expect to have that. So I was a little confused. And what's interesting, what's really, and this is all I wanted to say, but now I'm just now getting to it. What was interesting is evidently he has been having an in-house debate with Raymond Ibrahim. Now, Raymond Ibrahim, you may remember I have mentioned him about all the Crusade stuff. He wrote a book, in essence, in defense of the Crusades. And he's a Coptic Christian. And I need to, now that I've listened to Jay's stuff, I need to go find Raymond Ibrahim's stuff and listen to that other side. Because all I have were quotes from Jay about what Raymond Ibrahim said, including one that said there's greater historical evidence of Muhammad's existence than for Jesus. Interesting. That would raise a lot of methodological and historical questions. But personally, I think it's actually helpful that you would have this debate going on, because that's going to clarify a lot of stuff. When you don't have debate going on, bad assertions can just be repeated over and over again without ever being challenged. And so I want to go back and find Raymond Ibrahim's first onslaught, shall we say, against Jay Smith. And I think a lot of some of the debates that Jay was talking about, I think they are online. I'm not going to have time to do this before the next trip, obviously, with the debate that I'm going to be doing and things like that. But I want to get into it because we aren't anywhere near done with dealing with Islam. It sort of seems like for a while that was all anybody could talk about, with all the stuff going on in Iraq and Afghanistan and 9/11 and now everybody's forgotten it. It just, and I've lamented more than once the fact that I can't get Reformed Christians to express a consistent love for and desire to be used by God to reach out to Muslims, no matter how hard I try. And it's not that there aren't some, there are some, but man, we are in a very small minority. And in fact, it seems significantly more popular to just express detestation and hatred toward Muslims than anything else. And so the first stop in Dallas, by the way, is going to be on the subject of Islam in February, Lord willing. Again, this isn't written in stone yet. We're trying to hammer out the details. But fascinating stuff. And those of you who were around back then, I'm not sure if Algo remembers any of it or if he was just snoring when I was covering all this stuff. But what you are dealing with when you deal with Islam is foundational to what you're dealing with when you talk to many other groups as well. New Testament reliability, transmission of the text over time, all sorts of stuff like that. So it does have value even if you don't think you're ever going to talk to a Muslim. The fact of the matter, the way things are going, if you live in Michigan, you may be ruled by Muslims before long. And that could be a real problem. Anyway, so that was fascinating. That was great. All right. So I had some people, as I said, I picked up David Allen's new self-published book, Liberating Romans from Reformed Captivity. One of the worst titles ever. No such thing as reformed captivity. This isn't. I'm sorry, it's not a serious work of scholarship. It has lots and lots of footnotes, but it is it is one of those books where somebody, and we all know who, somebody is massively multiplying citations that actually don't have anything to do with what you're talking about. It's for show. It's like, how many footnotes can I get into this, and how many quotes can I give, and how many. I mean, Ken Wilson is just taken as gospel truth in this book. All right, you start off with the two-part Romans stuff, which is just beyond silly. It's just absurd on its face. But then you get into Ken Wilson stuff and Manichaeism, and the elect passing gas, all the stuff that goes with Manichaeism. And then, like I said, you got this guy from Southeastern with some hexagon of heresy stuff, and it's just like, what on earth is this stuff? And then Arrogant Canner pops back up. I mean, I knew he was out there. He's running around in chat rooms on Facebook demonstrating that after 20 years he still doesn't have a clue what it is about Calvinism. He just knows he hates it. He doesn't understand it. He has no interest in those things. And he's promoting this book. I mean, there's a recommendation for you when when Arrogant Canner says, this is a great book. And of course he was attacking me. So I wrote back to him and I said, hey, when are you going to apologize for, and I started down a little list of all the stuff we've documented about him. And of course he's not going to respond to that because he never has. Not since January of 2010, when he was given the opportunity to come clean, tell the truth, and he decided to double down, and Norm Geisler defended him, and Liberty defended him, and all these people, at least until the wheels fell off. And so anyways, so with all of that, I popped open the book, and I was chasing some citations. What I was doing was I was going, okay, look, let's try to provide an example from this book, because dealing with this book is similar to dealing with Chosen but Free. Remember the story I told you about Chosen but Free? When I was first writing The Potter's Freedom, this was 25 years ago, I wrote to Dr. Geisler, and I said, what's confusing to me is that there is no exegesis of John chapter 6 in Chosen but Free. Could you explain why that is? And he said, well, of course, I've thoroughly exegeted it. And so I wrote back with every single reference to John chapter 6 in the book, which was hard to do because the scripture index in the first edition stunk. It was 2 pages long and was nowhere near exhaustive. And you read all the references, and there was no... He'd mention it over here, he'd mention another thing over here, something over here, in different topics, passing reference. There was no exegesis of John chapter 6. All he did was he sent a note card back, said, if you publish, I'll respond. That was the last I ever heard from Norman Geisler directly. And so the book, the Chosen but Free, hey, at least you had chapters. So you could sort of somewhat figure that if something was going to be addressed, it's here. But what I've discovered with a lot of this stuff is a lot of these folks, especially with provisionists now, that was not a term, of course. Of course, Norm came up with moderate Calvinists and extreme Calvinists and all the rest of this kind of silliness. But it's just how scattered they are. If you ask them, could you just exegete the text, you'll get a weather report, a little reference to Stonewall Jackson, something about Bitcoin. It reminds me of these 2 ladies that were in our chat channel long ago. Carla is one of them, And when I was said I'd be going on a trip, they'd start going through all the stuff that they were throwing in my suitcase for me. Remember that? I mean, 2 rubber bands, a paper clip, half a Twinkie. That's just some kitty treats, which I might actually use these days. It's possible. But it was just this potpourri of stuff. And that's what you get from these guys when you ask them, could you just maybe tell us what the text says? And so I was looking through and I'm like, what does it say about Romans 8, 7, and 8? Because the title of the book is Liberating Romans from Reformed Captivity. Well, if you can liberate Romans from Reformed captivity, and Romans 8, 7 through 8 is where, no one can submit to God's law, not even capable of doing so, et cetera, et cetera. There must be, an exegesis, a discussion. I can't find anything. I eventually had to just look for the word Romans, and had to look, which in a book by this title was a lot of stuff I didn't need to be looking at, but I couldn't find anything. Because obviously my big interest is Romans chapter 8, because we have for years provided a refutation of David Allen's interpretation. We've gone into the text. We've demonstrated where he has misunderstood or misused scholarly commentary. And we've pressed the point, and he's never responded. Now, I am convinced now he's never even listened. I think he's one of those folks, just like Norm Geisler, never read Potter's Freedom, because he would feel that would be granting something to a young, snot-nosed kid that he didn't deserve. And I don't think David Allen listens to any of the critiques. It's an echo chamber. He might hear a summary from somebody, but I don't think he's listened to anything we've said. I don't think he's read anything we've written in response to him. And that's his choice. But I think I know why that is. But I'll let you figure that out for yourself. So I'm running through the whole book trying to find anything where I could go, okay, here's the exegesis offered of this text from Romans chapter 8. Let me just remind you, because this should be under total depravity. This should be right at the beginning. If you're going to free Romans, liberate Romans from reformed tyranny, reformed captivity. Verse 6, for the mind set on the flesh is death, but the mind set on the spirit is life and peace, because the mind set on the flesh is at enmity toward God. For it does not subject itself to the law of God, for it is not even able to do so. Udagar dunatai. And those who are in the flesh are not able to please God. So, if you're in the flesh, is saving faith, is repentance and faith pleasing to God? Of course it is. So you can't be in the flesh to do that. You have to be in the spirit. It's verse 9. However, you are not in the flesh, but in the spirit, if indeed the Spirit of God dwells in you. So you have terms of inability. Udagar dunatai in verse 7 and u dunantai in verse 8. So these are fundamental statements. Those who are in the flesh are not able to please God. So, is it not rather logical to expect that a book that advertises itself, there are times I can blame my publishers for things in my books, subtitles and things like that. When you're the publisher, when it's self-published, you got nobody to blame for yourself. So if it's liberating Romans from reformed captivity and you don't even try, Now, I might have missed it. Maybe no references were given to it or something. Maybe I'll run into it eventually. But because what I eventually want to do is I want to walk through what pretends to be a discussion of Romans 8:28 and following. It is scattered, disjointed. You know, I've heard that Dr. Allen's a good preacher. He would fail himself if he ever preached a sermon that is so convoluted and so all over the planet as what he does on Romans chapter 8. And again, does not respond to the vast majority of what we said. And I think that's purposeful. So that's what I was doing. And so I followed a footnote someplace, an endnote someplace. And I ran into a couple that I wanted to share with you. And there's all sorts of other stuff. So, you know, as time allows, we'll go through some of this stuff. But just as an example of just the kind of argumentation that, you know, from that webcast I told you about with the guys at Trinity, you know, they're promoting this guy as the be-all and end-all of the provisionist writers. Now, this is your man. Okay. Let's see what the man has to say. So in footnote 405, there is an attempt, and again, there's nothing new here. Allen started responding to Owen years and years ago, and even though, you know, an entire book was written that went after him, he's pretty much just doubled down on it without really hearing it. But listen to this footnote. So speaking of Owen in The Death of Death and Death of Christ, Owen's logical argument is as follows. Number one, Christ's atonement was for an equivalent number of people as is his intercession. So let's stop just there. That almost sounds like, well, he can only atone for a certain number, the same number that he intercedes for. The reality is, the biblical argument is, that the high priest, in his function as high priest, offers the sacrifice, one of the couple of sacrifices that were made on Yom Kippurim. He offers the sacrifice, but he then takes the blood and he enters into the holy place and he sprinkles the blood on the mercy seat. And so the audience of the atoning work and the intercessory work before the mercy seat is the same. Those for whom the sacrifice is made are those who are interceded for before the mercy seat. So if that's what the high priest does, then this is what we're told in Hebrews. Jesus is able to save to the uttermost those who draw nigh unto God by him. Why? Since he ever lives to make intercession for them. So the saving power is in the intercessory work of Christ. And that intercessory work of Christ is specific. It's limited. He's not interceding for all people. So Owen's argument is that there is a consistency. So technically, the word for an equivalent number of people as is his intercession is true, but the way of its expression could make you think that he was talking about numbers rather than the identity of the group for whom the intercession is being made. Number two, Christ intercedes only for the elect alone. Well, I've had a lot of conversations with people about this. I could be wrong, but just a few months ago, half a year ago now, on that difficult trip back to Jonesboro. If I recall correctly, I think maybe one of our opponents, because our opponents weren't exactly on the same page. I'm not even sure where that one guy was, honestly, the Whitey View guy. But I'm not certain if one of them didn't at least say that Jesus did intercede for others. But it's painfully clear, according to Hebrews chapter 7, if Christ intercedes for you, you will be saved. That is the expression of salvific power. So Christ intercedes only for the elect alone. Number 3, therefore, Christ's atonement was made for the elect alone. So the argument is, if you atone for someone but you do not intercede for them, you're breaking the completion of the high priest role. If the high priest had offered the sacrifice and then left the blood sitting on the altar and just left, then the work was not complete. The high priest had to have that blood in the bowl to enter into the holy place and sprinkle it on the mercy seat. So, by definition, if Christ is interceding before the Father, he has to have a foundation upon which to say, be merciful to this one who is in me. And so the intention of the Son in his self-giving is going to be identical to the intention of the Son in his intercession, because they are one work. They're not separate works. It's the one fulfillment. This did come up. This came up not only in that debate, but the next night in the debate on Roman Catholicism. Because this is the strength of the Reformed position. This is Hebrews 7, 8, 9, and 10 fulfilled. And so, yes, the audience is the same. And if the intercession saves, and it is the application of the atonement, then you have to come up with some kind of unbiblical terminology to go, well, yeah, Christ saves those for whom he intercedes, he dies for them, but that doesn't mean he didn't die for everybody else. It's like, well, but what was his intention in doing that? If it wasn't his intention to take the blood to the mercy seat, then are you literally saying that there were two different sacrifices? One without the sprinkling of the blood and one with? What do you say? Where do you get this? Where's this coming from? I think that's a pretty valid question. So, Owen errs, going back to Alan now. Owen errs because he is attempting to apply the passage to all the elect as an abstract class. Now, I'm not sure that Dr. Allen actually believes that the elect exist as an abstract class. But let's think about this for I'm not sure what even an abstract class is supposed to mean. But if we believe that we have died with Christ, that we were united with him in his death, then God must know who the elect are. I mean, it's sort of definitional. And he unites them with their head. And so his death becomes their death. His burial becomes their burial. His resurrection, their resurrection. And yes, all who are in Christ died with him. Unless there are people dying, unless Christ is dying over and over again, there is a true and valid sense that just as Paul says, you are already seated in the heavenly places in Christ Jesus. Well, I'm actually sitting in a office chair in Phoenix. But there is a sense in which, no, I'm seated in the heavenly places in Christ Jesus. You've died, your life is hidden with Christ in God. That's a spiritual reality in God's sight. And so there is a sense, yes, Owen isn't erring because he is applying the passage to all the elect. Because that's, well, it doesn't say what passage it is, by the way. Is it a biblical passage or is it just a section from Death of Death? I don't know. But certainly the author of Hebrews is saying that there is a sense in which all who are in the new covenant, whose sins are forgiven, they know God. No one teaches them come to know God. They all know him. He is merciful to their transgressions and their sins. Yes, all who are in that covenant, Christ has died in their place. Now, they don't experience it until time. But from God's perspective, it's a completed reality. He goes on to say, Paul, assuming that's Hebrews, I guess, Paul is referring only to believers. Now remember, this is the provisionist escape key. The provisionist escape key is anyone can be a believer. Don't worry about what Romans 8, 7 through 8 says. Don't worry about what John 6 says, that no one can come to me. The reality is, everybody has free will, and it's up to you to choose whether you become a believer. And once you become a believer, then all this stuff becomes true of you, because really predestination is just about what God's going to give to believers. Nothing more. And so Paul is referring only to believers. Well, that's because if you are united with Christ, you are going to be raised to spiritual life, given his Holy Spirit, and you're going to believe. But the provisionist turns that upside down and says, no, you have the power to be, you dead sinner, you heart of stone, the heart of stone can choose to become a heart of flesh. Has that ability. Every one of those bones in the valley of the dry bones has the ability in and of themselves, without any external operation other than just giving the gospel to everybody. So God sets up a big old massive speaker at the edge of the valley of the dry bones, and he goes, anybody who wants to come to life. And there are bones that start coming together without any supernatural impartation of life, and get up, and by the power of free will. Yeah, that's what you got. So the only response that he actually offers is two sentences. Owen errs because he's attempting to apply the passage to all the elect as an abstract class. We're not told why that's wrong. Or does the Bible ever do that? And then Paul is referring only to believers. We're not told how that's relevant either. But then you get the conclusion, and that's what this book is filled with, these unfounded conclusions. It must be this because I say so. Romans 8:32 through 34 does not address those who have not been justified. That's what caught me. I'm like, say what? Romans 8:32-34 does not address those who have not been justified. Therefore, while the text does prove that Christ died for everyone he intercedes for, it does not prove that he died for no one else. This is Owen's logical mistake. Now, I think that the great Dr. Owen would go, verily, what hast thou said? With, and today we go, say what? What? Could you repeat that one more time? So Romans 8:32 through 34. Let's just remind ourselves. Okay. This is after, those whom he foreknew. That's an act of God. That is not taking in knowledge. I'm sorry. You can't defend that. You assume it. You repeat it. You can't defend it. He also predestined to become conformed to the image of the Son. Oh, see, that's all it is. It's just predestination to be conformed to the image of the Son. But the only way you can be conformed to the image of his Son is everything else that's involved in salvation. You cannot conform someone who's not forgiven to the image of Christ. You cannot conform someone who does not believe to the image of Christ. Being conformed to the image of Christ is the final of all these things. And so predestination is unto salvation. I don't know how you cannot see. Your traditional lens has to be so thick to filter this out. So that he would be the firstborn among many brothers. Again, Christ is the center of all of this. And those whom he predestined, he also called. And those whom he called, he also justified. Those whom he justified, he also glorified. Golden chain. It can't be broken. It's pathetic to me that any Christian would ever try to break it, but man, do people do it. Because if that's true, it's all God. It's not of man. It's all of grace. And it's astonishing to hear people who will sing Amazing Grace and then try to break the golden chain. Because all who he calls are justified, all whom he justified are glorified. There's no way out of this. So, what then shall we say these things? If God is for us, who's the us? Those called, justified, glorified. Who is against us? And then here's the 32-34. He who indeed did not spare his own son, but delivered him over for us all. So here's the key phrase. Sorry, I'm going long here. I'll try to wrap up, but he knows, Alan knows this is classicus locus. This is classical text. But did not spare his own son, but delivered him over for us all. How will he not also with him graciously give us all things? So he tries to, the argument here is the greater the lesser, and blah, 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 blah. Who's the us? Verse 33 tells us. If this was any other topic, if this was the deity of Christ, this is resurrection, if this was almost any other topic that's not controversial between ourselves and the provisionists, they would see these things. But they don't see it. Verse 33, who will bring a charge against whom? God's elect. That's who the us is. God's elect. Oh no, it's believers. Well, the elect will believe, but that's not the language that's used here, is it? If God is for us, who is against us? He who indeed did not spare his own son, but delivered him over for us all. Who? God's elect. That's what it says. It's right there. It's right in front of us. We can read it in Greek. We can read it in English. It says the same thing. Who will bring a charge against God's elect? God is the one who justifies. So who does he justify? The elect. No, he justifies believers. You got to stick it in there someplace so you just don't hear what the text is saying, because you don't want to believe what the text is saying. Who is the one who condemns? Christ Jesus is he who died, yes, rather who was raised, who's at the right hand of God, who what? Also intercedes for whom? Oh, well, yeah, we admit that if he intercedes for you, you'll be saved. But there are those for whom he died that he won't intercede for. So he wasn't a faithful high priest. Right? I mean, there's only one side here that's allowing all of Scripture to speak. There's only one side here that can walk through the text. And David Allen is not on that side at all. Can't do it. It's not possible. Because they don't really believe what Romans chapter 8 is saying. So there is no logical mistake for Owen here at all. This is just a repetition of the same argument. And since it never improves, it demonstrates that he's not even listening to what we're saying. He's not even going there. So that was footnote number 405. 402 is so closely related. I need to cover it real quick. I'll cover it faster than I did the other one, I promise you. And then we'll call it a day for now. Footnote 402 says, though, I suppose I could do this. I don't know. Well, wait a minute. Where'd it go? See if I try to bring it. There we go. That might work. Is that clear enough? Footnote number 402 says, though Longenecker, Schreiner, and most other modern commentators, whether Reformed or non-Reformed, do not elaborate on Paul's use of us and its implications for the extent of the atonement, it is clear that whatever their views on the extent question, none asserts or even implies that Romans 8:31-34 suggests or supports limited atonement. Except we just walk through the text, and it does exactly that. Right? It specifically says, delivered over for us. For the substitutionarily for us. We believe in substitutionary atonement, but do you believe in a substitutionary atonement for someone who's not the us? Where do you get that from Romans 8? Well, you can't disprove it, but where do you get that from Romans 8? You don't get it from Romans 8, and you know you don't get it from Romans 8, because it ain't there. Charles Hodge seems to leave the identity of the us all somewhat open to interpretation. As Hodge continues his exposition, he goes on to talk about believers. Yeah, but Hodge doesn't have Allen's understanding of what believers are. Allen has the idea that believers are free will believers. Hodge doesn't believe that. That they had the ability to do this. They had the ability to take out their heart of stone, give themselves a heart of flesh, or the bones to put themselves together. And therefore, that determines God's choice of them as the elect. That's not Hodge's position. Even though John Murray seems to take us all vaguely as the elect and predestined, he may mean the predestined who are in a believing state, at least in his commentary. The predestined, so literally all Allen and his cohorts can do is try to go, well, sometimes, you can be the elect, but you're not yet believing. See, you haven't experienced regeneration. That's not what they're talking about. They're not talking about before, prior to regeneration, and they're talking about the elect and the results of being elect, and belief is a part of the result of the work of the Holy Spirit of God. I think that's why you don't have even an attempt at trying to deal with Romans 8, 7 through 8 here, because there's just nothing there. The all things contemplated are the gifts and blessings of grace bestowed upon believers, and are therefore all the things which the context, as when dealing with salvation in its whole expanse, would be expected to indicate Murray Romans 3:26. Again, as soon as they say believers, they go, there's our out. But that's not what any of these people actually believed. That's not what they're trying to communicate. They're not trying to communicate, God's choice was depend upon their free will resurrection to life of themselves. However, as indicated above, Murray seems to broaden the us all to include all of the elect as such, and the justified when he makes arguments for limited atonement and redemption accomplished. Well, of course, he did. And that's what he was communicating in his commentary on Romans. But this is the kind of absolute doublespeak. Trying to say, well, they didn't necessarily say this, they didn't necessarily say that. And yet, honestly, you look at what was said here, and none asserts or even implies that Romans 8:31-34 suggests or supports limited atonement. So let me just 8:31-34, huh? Okay, all right. So here it is. Here's 8:31-34, and it says, "He who did not spare his own son, but delivered him, but who per hemon panton, in behalf of us all, delivered him," that is standard sacrificial language, "how shall he not also together with him, charesetai, freely give to us, ta panta, all things?" Who is to us? Tis enkalesai kata eklekton. Who will bring a charge against the elect, theou, of God? God is the one who justifies. This, for whom does the Father give the Son substitutionarily? For the elect of God. What these guys want to say is, that's not God's choice. That was theirs. But in the same chapter, it said they are not even able to subject themselves to the law of God. We're not talking about that right now. The traditions of men versus the words of God. How many times have we seen it? How many times do we have to see it? Well, I'll tell you right now. Unless the Spirit of God opens your heart and mind, you can hold all sorts of stuff. Oh, you're saying God has predestined that some of his children are never going to know. So that again is an objection against the plain teaching. God does whatever he pleases in heaven and earth. You don't even have the willingness to accept the doctrine of God that a pagan king had named Nebuchadnezzar. When he said, who can lift a hand? Who can resist him? He was right. He was right. And you know what? God will probably demonstrate to you someday exactly what his purposes were. And you'll go, I lay my hand on my mouth. And I wish I had done that before I published all those books back on earth. So there you go. So yeah, there's lots of more of stuff like that in there that we will get to. But I at some point, I guess we will just have to go to the section on Romans 8 and read all sorts of stuff that it's just not relevant. It just doesn't make any sense. It's just thrown out there. It's dust and smoke and mirrors and stuff like that. And try to get through it, and then once you're through it, go, okay, where was the exegesis? Do you know what the text actually positively says now? Or have you just been overwhelmed with, well, it may not mean this, it could mean that, and this guy over here, he thinks that the sky is green, and, just irrelevancies all over the place. And then you have to ask yourself the question, why is that? Why is one side always doing that? Well, the other side says, hey, let's just walk through the text. Let's see if we can follow the argument all the way through. I think that's really the best way to do things. All right. Well, thanks for listening to the program today. Lord willing. Yeah, why was something going on Thursday? Is there something? I don't know. When you get home from a trip, no, Friday we've got the plumber coming. Sometimes you just get you raise the microphone.
Oh, I just wanted to point out that tomorrow we'll premiere another one of my new show.
Oh.
Let the Scripture Speak. So I just finished recording that this morning.
Mm-hmm.
So this one ought to draw a little more fire than the last one.
Oh, okay.
So
all
just
right.
thought I'd throw that out there.
Little free advertising never hurt anybody.
Little free advertising. That's right. I got my shot there. So.
Yeah, well, we did start in your garage, so I suppose it's time for the dividends to pay out. Something along those lines is what they would say. So, all right, we'll look forward to that, and who knows I don't know if I'll continue with any of that next time around. We'll see. Like I said, with this debate, hopefully by Thursday we'll be able to tell you what it's going to be about and with whom. You have some fair amount of work to do. Aside from plumbers and handymen and putting new doors up and everything else that goes along with a house that was built in 1969. And the FedEx person coming to the gate. I'm not sure if you're expecting anything, but probably not. Okay. Probably going to the bookstore, I would imagine. Anyways, thanks for watching the program. We will see you in a couple days. Lord willing. God bless.